It said that to truly survive a gunfight, you must be able to defend yourself in not just one, but 3 battles. Of course, there's the physical battle, right? Like that's the physical fight in which you have to neutralize that threat before he can kill you. Now, the second is the legal battle, because when the physical threat is ended, the fight's really just beginning. So even if you are morally and legally justified in using deadly force, you may still have to defend yourself in front of a jury against charges of manslaughter or murder. And finally, there's the emotional battle. Now, this is the one that most people overlook, but your life, and maybe even those that you are really counting on you, the ones that you love, that are looking for you for protection, like your lives may have been hanging in the balance as you answered that call to be the warrior that you need to be. And fear and adrenaline, anger, even guilt can wash over you during and after a self-defense shooting, causing you to say and do things that you're not entirely in control of, and potentially even increasing your legal risk of being judged for the actions that you took to defend yourself. In fact, when the police arrive after a shooting, it's one of the most critical times that you need to know what to say and do. And your next words and actions may mean the difference between staying behind with your family to help them recover from the shock and anxiety of an attack, or leaving them behind in the backseat of a police car. Now, knowing what to expect after a shooting and exactly how to handle yourself and work with law enforcement is an important part of your training. And it's exactly what we're here to discuss in this week's live stream. So, hey, everybody, this is Jeff Anderson, Executive Director of WarriorLife.com and the Warrior Life Academy. And with me today to talk about your actions in the aftermath of a self-defense shooting is Rob High of the Critical Incident Response Team at CCW Safe. So, Rob, welcome to the program, man.
Man, Jeff, thank you so much. It's an absolute honor to be here and get to talk about this stuff with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so excited to have you in our network because you offer the perfect combination of perspectives for today's show. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with CCW Safe or Rob, he's a retired law enforcement officer who started with the Oklahoma City Police Department in March of '95 and retired as a detective in the robbery unit in 2020. Now, he's also served as a department firearms instructor, and he's earned several nationally recognized instructor certifications in control and defensive tactics, arrest and control, and police use of force, acting as the subject matter expert in these areas for the Oklahoma City Police Department. And during this time, Rob has been recognized in U.S. federal court as an expert witness for use of force and controlled defensive tactics. And he's now retired, and Rob works with the Critical Incident Response Team for CCW Safe, which is a member-based legal service designed for concealed carry weapon permit holders that takes on the burden of the expenses in defending a self-defense use of force critical incident. Now, you can find out more about Rob and CCW Safe by going to visit them online at www.ccwsafe.com. So, Rob, as I said, I'm really looking forward to this interview because as we were talking a little bit before the show, there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions out there by people who even consider themselves more as experts out there. I mean, people who have been shooting for a long time, owned a gun for a long time. And I know you come across these a lot. So I want to start with maybe some of those myths. So what are maybe like the 3 biggest misconceptions that most gun owners have about the realities of a self-defense shooting, defending themselves with a firearm?
Let's try to keep it to 3. Number 1 is I have a gun and now I'll be safe, without any real work into become proficient with this tool. That's all it is. You have to understand there's plenty of people in the population that will not be deterred simply because they know you have a firearm. Just not going to happen. So don't get that in your head that having a gun is going to be your end all be all. So many things, you have the physical part of that and the failure of that physical part, not training with the thing and thinking that you're just going to elevate and rise to the occasion. All of a sudden I'm going to get that spike of adrenaline and all of a sudden I'll be Superman and things are going to work. And anybody that has ever done this knows that that's a load. That's crap. I have, well, my perspective, my understanding, my own personal response to things in law enforcement. The understanding that you develop when you realize the first time you've ever been shot at, because your perspectives on everything change then. Standing static on a safe range, punching holes in paper is not firearms training. It's fundamental fine tuning. There's so much more that goes into firearms training. And honestly, one of the worst in the world at making adaptations and things, unless you're on a SWAT team or a high-speed unit of some sort. We really fail remarkably in law enforcement at those kinds of things. I've been remarkably pleased with the availability of really remarkably good training in the civilian world. I'm a new guy in that world, but there are so many people out there. Now, there's a lot of blowhards too, so you need to vet your instructors. You need to have a place that you can go to and learn and go, well, Jeff's done this or Rob's done that. One of the things I always want to point out to guys that do that as well are this guy that you're going to go receive training from. When's the last time he received training? I mean, I'm in my 60s. I've trained more this year than I have probably in the last 5 combined. It's just one of those things that there's stuff out there that's so good, and it opens those doors to other possibilities for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there were a couple things that you just said there, right? Like, one, you got to train with your weapon, right? Like, don't just think you're going to rise to the occasion, but also what is most of the training that people get. So the more that you train, if you're going to a static range and you're used to just standing there and shooting at a flat target, a 2-dimensional target that's not running at you with a knife or anything like that, not shooting back at you, you're getting more training, but you're also getting more programming that this is what a gunfight is like. And of course it's not, right? Like, it's not going to be a static environment like that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there. You've got to really, I'd rather err on the side of actually knowing how to handle a firearm, but I think that too many people get comfortable with just going to the range, just throwing that as a category and saying that, yep, I've done my training. Yep, I'm experienced. Yep, I'm a gun owner. Yep, I'm going to be the good guy and win every time. So yeah, it's interesting. I think, all this is about the aftermath also. So what happens? So I think that's great for preparation also. But I think, like, after a self-defense shooting, I think a lot of people don't think about it after that as well, right? Like, they just think, okay, bad guy's down, I call 911 now. And I think there's more to the 911 call than a lot of gun owners realize. I know when you're dealing with CCW safe and in critical incident response, you've got to look at when you're looking at the entire case, you're looking at from the point of everything they did before, but then, like, the clock doesn't stop after, or the notes don't stop after that bullet leaves the gun or the bad guy goes down. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you feel victims make, even when they're reaching out for like a 911 help for police to respond?
Oh, goodness. I have to pre-plan this. I have to rehearse this myself. I have to understand these things happen. How am I going to handle this? As an investigator, I can tell you right now, one of the very first things, and probably before I ever even make contact with you, as I'm on my way to the scene, I'm going to call the communication center 911 and have them get me the audio file of that 911 call. And I'm going to check kind of your condition, your excitement level. But I'm really not looking for too terribly much, unless you're kind of covering something up and you make an excited utterance or something like that. And there is no privilege in a 911 call. That is part of my case file. That's going to be played in court. Understand that right up front. So a 911 operator is truly trained to keep you on the phone and continue that conversation. That won't happen with me unless I'm trying to direct other resources in and get something handled. I'm the involved person as a citizen, not as law enforcement. And people think law enforcement get away with this, or military guys get away with that. All of our actions in either one of those categories are looked at and examined. A lot of the civilian population doesn't understand to what degree that is, but it's pretty intense. So post-incident, the first thing I want to make sure is that I don't have any other assailants. Is my guy acting alone? Are there other people? As soon as I'm at a safe place and I can get to that point where, yes, now's the time to reach out and make contact. I want to request emergency assistance and I want to request law enforcement. And it's very simple. I can give any geographical or geographical information without that being anything that's going to harm me. So giving my name and my date of birth and things like that, that's a bonus for me as an investigator coming in, because I can go ahead and pull that stuff up before I get there. And I know that you're just Joe Citizen and you're not some guy with a leg long rap sheet or something. But that statement to 911 is, this is my name, this is my location. And you can give just a tiny little synopsis of, I was attacked, I had to defend myself, I've discharged my firearm, we need emergency services, I'm wearing this is where we're located relative to the property that we're on. I'll be standing by waiting for police to return. I need to make sure that I'm safe and there aren't any other threats, and I'm going to disconnect right now. And I do. My second call comes to CCW Safe, because I know exactly how that response gets handled right then. And that is, the critical incident response team, our ownership group, and our national trial counsel all get messaged within like 30 seconds of that phone call. So we determine that, yes, you're a member in good standing and that kind of stuff. We can go into that, our response here in a little bit. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure, as a citizen defender, as somebody defending my own life or the life of somebody else, because both of them apply, that everything is in place and I'm not a threat to officers as they respond. In this last year, we had that horrible incident in Colorado. You've got a young man that responds to an active shooter that has already engaged in killing attempts. And this kid is a concealed carrier. He comes out, he sees what's going on, confronts the situation, puts the bad guy down, goes up to him, picks his firearm up. Responding law enforcement come in. They act really fast, but you've also got law enforcement that have been shot in this scenario. These guys are a little emotional coming into this. They're running in hot anyway. And they see this guy holding a long gun and they shoot him and they put him down. And that was the Good Samaritan that just saved people. And I can't imagine being the cop that has to live with that. Yeah. So I want to make myself the least threatening person that I can possibly be. So I worked a case actually in the defense role, and advised as the expert in the case. And it was done as perfectly as I think could have been done. It was a physician. He was attacked. He had to use lethal force to defend himself. It wasn't a fatal shooting. As soon as his attacker was down and the other one had fled, and he knew the guy had fled. He secured his firearm in his pickup truck and had his child make a 911 call. And he was giving them step by step, tell them this, tell them this, tell them this, tell them my gun is secured, tell them we need an ambulance. I'm a physician. I'm working on the guy right now. So those are things that are really important. Now, when police get there, everybody thinks that post-incident, I'm not saying nothing until my attorney gets here. Absolutely, you're right. And if you're going to get diarrhea of the mouth and say things that we can't take back, that make your defense really hard, don't say anything. I'd rather you go spend a night in the county jail than jeopardize spending the next 15 to 25 years in a penitentiary. So if you're really not sure what to say, just don't say anything. What'd you have?
Yeah, I definitely want to dive deeper into that. You said there's something I want to kind of go back to a little bit. You said in the very beginning, because you're going and you're grabbing the recorded call from 911. I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially since you're focusing on the incident, but they don't realize that you're being recorded every single thing that you say during that call. And like you said, 911 they're trained to be able to keep you on there. Of course, they want as much information as possible for the responding officer to be able to go off to or go on when they get there. But anything that you say, it's in the background, something your spouse says, something that the person who is the bad guy and injured and down on the ground, anything that they say, all of that is going to be recorded.
Yes.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, you can disconnect from there if you've given all the information, and I'm sure they'll have your phone number to be able to call back if they need anything. But I think people really need to understand that, like, it's not a matter of, okay, you read your rights and now you can shut up then or shut up when the officer comes. When you make that call, everything that you say is part of the case. It's all potentially admissible there for when you have to respond there. I think also there's always this thing in the media, I think especially, about the mindset of police officers, or, sometimes they're vilified and sometimes they're the good guys, sometimes they're the bad guys. And I think that what I love about your perspective on all of this from both ends is that you've lived a life on the response end. So I'd really like to know from your perspective, like, what's in your mind as a police officer when you come upon the scene, and what are you looking for that gun owners should be aware of, whether in the right or wrong, I guess? Like, how do you approach that scene?
Well, understand, if you're the patrol guy coming in on this, you're coming in pretty amped up. You have those different conditions of alertness. A guy responding to a shooting that we know there's been a shooting. We don't know that it's stopped. So you're coming in kind of on point. And I never this, because they're absolutely a lifeline. I give a lot of praise to emergency operators, to 911 call takers. Dispatchers are a lifeline. They have pulled my bacon out of the fire more than one time. By that same token, they can only tell me what they've been told. And I don't always get valid, pertinent information. So as I come into this situation, I really disregard anything about the violator's gone, or there's no more gun, or there's a gun until I prove that there's not a gun. So keep those things in mind. Also keep things in mind that, like I mentioned earlier, if I throw out there the simple fact that I'm not making a statement until my attorney's here, you've really taken away any options for me. And until we get something figured out, unless it's just remarkably clear cut, you're probably spending the night in jail. That's okay. That's not a pleasant thing, but there are far worse things that could happen if we say the wrong things. So the physician I was working, the officers roll up and they're coming from cover and really had a really good response. And he says, my firearm is, he tells again, my firearm's secured in my vehicle. You let me know when you need it. I'll unlock that for you. You can grab it. This has happened. This has happened. This has happened. I was standing here. They were standing there. There's nothing wrong with giving what we call a safety statement. I was standing here. The assailant was standing here. I discharged my weapon one time in that direction. My shell casing is right over there. Anything that's potential that holds evidentiary value. It's important because I can't just expect that law enforcement is going to find everything. Most of them do. They do a really good job at recovering evidence. But if I don't talk and you're telling me that the guy had an associate with him and he took off running that way and he threw something, and I think it was a knife in the bushes over there. All of those things just build up credibility for me. So it's not bad to point out evidence or the positions that we were in. Law enforcement guys, good investigators understand that you may tell me that, I fired 3 shots, and it's like, Jeff, we got 12 casings over here. Mm-hmm. That's okay. That's not a big deal. That's a trauma response. That's a trauma memory, which is a completely different thing. There's lots of those things that we can explain away. But that's really what I'm looking for, is give them a little safety brief. This happened, this happened, this happened. Everybody thinks they want to do I was in fear for my life and I had to, just be a human. I understand as an investigator, you've seen it. The reactions for somebody that are involved in a life and death situation are so vastly different, and every one of them is normal. It's nothing for me to walk up, and it can be a guy that is just tough as nails, and all of a sudden I roll up on the scene of his shooting and he's over set aside and he's just sobbing. That's a natural response. I can have a guy, same situation, and all of a sudden I look over and he's just retching and throwing up in the yard, bent over holding his knees. That's a normal response. The other part of that is I can roll up and you're over in the corner and you're high-fiving somebody and you're just amped up. Well, guess what? That's a normal response. You just survived a lethal attack. So incident by incident and person by person, I can't tell you what the normal response is going to be, but what I can tell you is it's normal.
Yeah. I think there's another aspect of it from the gun owner, from the property owner perspective. Also, you kind of mentioned earlier, but you never really know what the experience level is of the responding officer. We've seen videos, right, of like even if a child being shot, like a police car just roaring up, coming to a stop, person jumps out and just shoots, right? Like we don't know exactly what experience level, because all the adrenaline that we're feeling from the attack, a responding police officer is going to have adrenaline because you don't know if there's somebody there. As you said, doesn't matter if 911 said there's no weapon in the area, there's no more weapon, it's been put away, it's whatever. Like you have to assume, if you want to go home to mama or you want to go home to papa, you've got to assume that there's still a threat there. And so what can we as gun owners do to make sure that we're safe when police do respond and they show up, that police car pulls up there, what can we do to make sure that we stay safe and we're not mistaken for the bad guy?
If I've still got threats that are present, that can get really dicey. But if the threat is removed, if I've stopped the threatening action, or if they've fled, or whatever the case may be, one of the things I feel comfortable with as a responder is empty hands. I really want to know that I have empty hands, and there's nothing wrong with being verbal at this time. And going, my firearm is secured in a holster on my right hip, or my firearm is secured in my vehicle, or it's secured in the home, or whatever. But those are things that can affect that as well. Everything about these cases, if you're going to carry a gun and you haven't started thinking about these things, I like to explain it, and I know it gets old because I use the same little analogy every time, but I've taken a perfectly calm surface of a pond, no wind, no nothing, and it's just beautiful. And I grab a rock and I throw it out into the middle of the pond, and those concentric ripples, they just go and go and go and go. You have to understand those ripples are the effects on everybody else involved. So you have your assailant and all of their family, and guess what? They're involved. You have you, and you think it's just me. No, that's not true, because you have a spouse, or you have parents, or you have children or siblings, and if you don't think they're not affected by this, you've lost your marbles. You need to think this through. And then the other side of this is this law enforcement response that's coming in, and you have no earthly idea, like you were just saying. I don't know what his level of training is. I don't know how seasoned this guy is. I know what I want coming, but I don't get to pick that. I get whoever gets dispatched and is the available officer at the time. So I don't know his level of training. I don't know what call he just came from. He may be coming from a worse call than what I'm bringing him to. So human nature is human nature. I can tell I don't have anything in almost 3 decades of law enforcement that I can look back on and go, man, I'm really ashamed of that. But there are things I would look at and go, I wish I'd have handled that better. But I'm not ashamed of it. I did the best I could with what I had at that given time. And you have to understand that these guys don't, if you're in a large city, I worked hundreds of shootings. It's not a big deal for me to roll. Now, it's the worst day in the world for you. But this isn't a big deal to me. Or you can be in a little country town and you have no earthly idea how these guys are going to respond, because they've never had one of these. So location is kind of a big deal as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We talked a little bit about some of the things that people should say when police show up. But I think this is another one of those areas where sometimes we have to empty the glass also, because there is a lot of myths and misinformation that's spread out there about what, like you said, just tell them I was in fear for my life and then shut up. Don't say anything after that.
Yes.
And what are some of the other mistakes maybe that you think that, I think especially when we're talking about like the quote unquote experienced gun owners out there, the people who have been bragging the most over the gun store counter, some of the things that you think people might kind of conceive as being the truth, or ways that or actions that they should take, but from your perspective that are the wrong things to do?
Oh, goodness. Number one, those guys that are running their mouths are those guys that don't know if they could really do that or not. A lot of the times, the guys that are really verbal about it are trying to convince themselves they could do it if the situation was forced on them. By that same token, I know cops that carry guns that I don't know would ever use them. That's just really not in them.
But as far as like kind of like the things that people say, I think a really good example is I was in fear for my life. And then it's almost like you can read it off of a card, right? I used to go to our neighborhood. We used to have every year, every summer, we would have our neighborhood, not our neighborhood watch program, but it was like our party for our neighborhood.
Yeah,
and we would always have local law enforcement show up. Yeah, they would just come to, let us know what's going on in the police department, and just kind of community, right? It's building law enforcement as part of the community. And we would always have the guy who, was the football coach from college and played football all of his life and is now 80 years old. And he'd always raise his hand. He's like, I just want to know one thing. Can I still just drag him in the house and from my front lawn? It's like, and he's told no every year, but I swear he still believes that, he can still do things like that. But I think there are a lot of those myths that are out there about how you should act, how you should be. Are the police the good guys when they show up? Are they the bad guys when they show up? And I'm just curious if you other things that you might hear that you think are kind of like the what people conceive as the truth to say, like what their words should be and what they actually shouldn't be. I know, for example, like one thing we've talked about before is the I'm going to blank on his name, the hockey dad. This was years ago, right? And he was the parent of a hockey student, and when the police showed up, he made sure he wasn't afraid to fight, and I wasn't afraid to fight, right? So it was like there's no fear. I'm literally saying like I was not in fear for my life when they show up. Are there any other things that come to your mind about mistakes that people might make in what they do say?
I think it's from their own mindset. I think you think that I'm going to believe the things that you're telling me. This is going to sound condescending. As an investigator, I have been known to talk with other investigators and say, Jeff had the right to remain silent, but he absolutely did not have the ability. You were your own worst enemy. So something that was a reality check for me, because I was a public servant. I did this. I carried a gun as part of my daily duties, and it was just in a worst case scenario, this is going to have to come into play. But as a citizen carrier, as a citizen defender, things have changed for me. As a police officer, if I'm involved in a shooting, when law enforcement response comes to me, I'm handled as a victim. You're not. Until I prove otherwise, as a citizen defender, you're being handled as a suspect. There's a difference. So that's where we want to, we've learned over time from trauma responses and trauma memories that things can get jumbled and sequences get out of order and things like that. And in order to get the best kind of interview, the best kind of information post-shooting from a police officer, they get 2 sleep cycles before they come in and give a statement. As an investigator, I want to get this done and knocked out as soon as I can. So if I can get you down to the office, we're coming down to the office. So it is not, and it's human nature, honestly. And people that think that I'm smart enough to do this. I can handle this. It's human nature to want to go, but Jeff, wait, this happened and this happened and this happened, and I had to do blah, blah, blah. No, you don't. I need you to get calm. I need you to get in your proper headspace. And if you have to spend a night in a holding tank, okay, go spend the night. Because those memories are not as clear as you think that they are. So for me, as a citizen defender, I can give you biographical information. There's nothing wrong with saying, this is who I am. This is my personal information. This is where I live. This is my phone number. And that's helpful for the investigator, because he can now plug all my stuff in and go, okay, he's a good guy. He's lived a clean life. There's nothing here that's a hiccup. That's a plus for me. It's a plus for me, even if I've had screw ups in life at some point in time, but now I'm matured and grown up and living on the straight and narrow, and all is good there too. But my response has to be, when they start to go into that, let's talk, let's close this thing out tonight. My response has to be, listen, I need you to understand that no matter what, I want to be completely cooperative with you. I'm going to answer anything you have to do and everything else, but I'm really, really shaken up. I've just come through the worst experience in my life. So I think it's in my best interest to wait until my attorney's present. And if we could call and schedule a time to get that done, I'd be happy to do that. But I sure want to talk to them first and have them present with me and make sure I don't do anything that gets me in trouble. Boom. Guess what? As an investigator, I feel really good. I'm looking at Jeff. He's got all his stuff. He's lived in the same house for X amount of time. He's locked in. He's a solid citizen. He's not going to be a flight risk. There's nothing hinky about this. And even without really being able to piece all the details together, he's got this worked out already, that I know I'm not going to have any, Jeff, who's your attorney? Here's my card. Make sure they call me. You guys work it out. Please have them call me as soon as possible, and just so I can visit with them a little bit, but then we'll work on scheduling a time for you to give a statement. Simple enough. Simple enough. We had one 2 weeks ago out in LA that we responded to, that super good deal. Great self-defense thing. I don't think we'll have any issues with it at all. And the guy actually had to spend the night in jail. Not a big deal. I mean, we bond him out the next day and get everything set up and have an attorney in place with him. And then critical response team rolls out and we take him through the thing and kind of, because if you haven't been through the system, you have no earthly idea what's coming at you next. So
that's kind of where I want to go next with it also, because I do love that you have this perspective from both the law enforcement side and now with the legal side as well. And I think that, I think for all the reasons that you said earlier, like somebody can get diarrhea of the mouth. They just want to talk. They want to talk. That's a natural response from adrenaline, right? Like you just went through a harrowing experience. Potentially your life was on the line. Your family was in danger. There's this sense that we just want to get it out, right? We want to talk to somebody. We want to talk to anybody and just kind of get it all out. What should a gun owner who's involved in a self-defense shooting know about what to expect going forward as the incident response progresses? Like, in other words, I've called 911. We've covered that. Police officer shows up. We know they're going to respond. Like, we expect that in our mind, that there's going to be a responding police officer. We talked about things to say, things not to say. Where does the night go from there? We've also talked that even if you are morally and legally justified for the incident, you may possibly still be brought in for questioning. Just by saying like, hey, I'll talk to you in a couple of days may not mean that you're not going to go away in the backseat of a police car, because you never know what that response is going to be, right? I mean, we've seen cases where people who did atrocious things and were almost at least in public eye or media, right? Like clearly in the wrong, stayed home. Police didn't charge anything. They just went about their way and filed a report, and then something else happens, right? But it could go the other way as well. There could be no sign of anything, and your responding police officer may still feel like, let's bring him in. We need to talk through this more, a little bit more. So you may still go away. So what are some of those things? If we could set them up almost linearly, what's going to happen when that police officer gets there? You've made contact and there's no more threat. You've said, like you said there, I want to cooperate, but I want my attorney present. What should a gun owner realize is coming up in the next days, weeks, months, or even potentially years?
Okay, like you said, you've made whatever little statement it is to the responding officers. Understand you're going to get placed in the backseat of a police car. Unless you're injured, something like that, and you need medical attention, and make sure absolutely that you've requested medical attention.
Let me stop you there, because that kind of blows my mind a little bit here. Do you recommend requesting? I'm saying this almost from a legal perspective, if anything, right? Is it best to request, even if you're not injured, is it still appropriate or good practice to request medical attention?
Only if I have a need. And it can be for however minor. I mean,
Okay.
You knock me to the ground, I want to get looked at. But at the same time, I don't want to make something up. There's cameras everywhere in life now. You can't even get somebody to help you anymore. They'd rather pull their phone out and record it. But even in just regular neighborhoods, the things I can pull evidentiary from somebody's Ring doorbell camera. That's really changed the game on a lot of things from law enforcement. So if I roll up and you're going, oh my gosh, I got to go to the hospital, and the investigator sees that you were never touched, it may have been okay that you had to deploy a lethal response. I don't have to be shot to defend myself. I mean, we know that. I just lost my train of thought. I apologize.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean, I think that's excellent clarification, actually. I mean, I remember when I was in an automobile accident and got out of the car perfectly fine. Didn't feel a single thing, hit a guardrail, totaled the vehicle, but not a scratch, nothing. The next day, I couldn't even get out of bed. Like my neck was just like, so I think that if there is a person, like if there is any physical confrontation or anything. So I have 2 points here. One, if you were touched in any way, you fell down, anything happened at all, it's probably not a bad idea to request medical support, right?
Not at all.
The other thing, and I think this is something that may be lost on a lot of people who are in screw him, he made the decision to come and rob me in my house or whatever, is if you have an injured assailant, to also request, make sure that that's known. Like you don't want to show any sort of irreverence for his life as well. Yeah. Now that might offend a lot of people, right? Yeah. It might offend a lot of people, like screw them, whatever. But again, especially if you're being recorded, you're on 911, letting them know this person is injured, please get somebody here fast, is different than not saying anything, even though you knew that they were bleeding out, and not showing any concern for their life whatsoever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important that I don't do anything that causes my word to be questioned. Is the reason I'm saying if I haven't been affected in any way physically, I'm not gonna sit here and go, hey, I need to go to the hospital. Mm-hmm. If I have, let's get looked at. as an investigator, I don't need anything that's going to cause a red flag for me. And lying about a non-injury is kind of a red flag. It's a small one, but it still is a red flag. I want to be as forthright and honest in everything that I do, no matter what cost to me. I can't undo a lie. And it's part of why I want to not give an investigator the opportunity to kind of twist my words. So that whole trauma response and trauma memory immediately post incident, I think it's really, really important that we do a little study on the psychology of the brain and kind of examine that stuff so that you have an understanding and go, oh man, yeah, I don't need to do that. And it's normal. I ran the police academy for 9 years. I trained hundreds of recruits, and it's one of those that in my position now as a responder, and we still investigate and help prep officers in officer involved shootings. So it's another part of what my partner and I do. And we've got 12 new homicide investigators that are on board now that we've trained them up to our protocols and our response plans. But it's really important for people to understand that. So
yeah, great. Okay, so I did pull you off track a little bit here, but I just thought it needed some clarification there. But so police respond, you're talking with them, there may be medical attention that's brought in, you may be brought in for questioning, that's totally possible. So what are some of those other things kind of linearly in the next days, weeks, months, years, potentially, that somebody might expect? Like, it wouldn't be surprising to be not subjected in, like, maybe that's the wrong word for it, but be exposed to that they might not know.
Well, an investigation is going to take place, and depending on the size of the agency, the town you live in, that kind of thing, can have a determination on the length of time that investigation may take. When I was a sex crimes investigator, we would average about 120 cases individually a year. That's a lot of cases. And so you're spinning all these plates at the same time and working so many things. So it may not go nearly as fast as you think. If there is a shooting involving a death or significant bodily injury, and charges are filed, we may be talking about 2 years plus. There really isn't, the wheels of justice grind really slowly. So you're going to have an officer or investigator that works through this investigation. They're going to interview you. They're going to interview, if the other side has survived the incident, there'll be full interviews with them if they will give it. Any witness interviews or anything else, all of those things are going to come into play. Every officer that's on the scene is doing a report, and because from different approaches and things like that, they're going to have different perspectives. All of those things get put together to give as clear a picture as you possibly can when we go in front of a district attorney or grand jury. These are the things that we have discovered. These are the results of our investigation show this. And people think that even as a seasoned robbery detective, you think I'm the one that filed a charge against you. No, I worked the case. I built the case through my investigation, and I went to the prosecutor or the grand jury, and I presented those things to them, and they determine whether charges are filed or not. And obviously, my work and the way I present that is going to hold some value with them, but it's not going to be the determining factor. Those factors are made in the prosecutor's office, even up to the federal level.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think people, I think like you said, and I know this just from, not from any sort of a self-defense shooting case, but just of different things I've had in the legal system, it does grind insanely slow. So, and this is going to be something that I think also there's a lot of financial investment that people don't really understand about it. Even if you're innocent, to be able to, the lawyers and everything else, and it can go on for a very long time. I think more people need to really understand more about the aftermath, I think, to make better decisions on the front end. I think not knowing about what is going to happen after the bullet leaves the gun, and always thinking that the good guys always win, the bad guys always lose, and you get to go home and be with your family. And of course, why would a jury, you're a tax-paying citizen, why would you possibly be ever found guilty for something? But there are a lot of little mistakes that can bring about charges. And I think that understanding this aftermath and understanding the conditions that you're going to be living under potentially for a long time. I mean, even just the judgment of your work, your neighbors, there's so much there that you are going to be facing that I think it helps you make better decisions on the front end and not being too trigger happy. And really, as you said in the very, very beginning, some of the things that people don't do, like you own a gun, that's not your magic talisman. You got to train with it. But, I've told this story before, like on our podcast and in different training that we've had, that when I was living in Texas and I got my concealed carry weapons card, the instructor spent, it was like a 4.5 hour course or whatever, and spent about 2.5 hours on why we needed to vote Republican to be able to keep our Second Amendment rights. And there was now this was not stuff that was covered, that was necessary by the state to be able to get your concealed carry weapons permit. But all of a sudden looks at his watch and like, oh, we're running out of time. Oh, we have to get through the legal section. And it's just like, okay, ding, 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 slide, zip right through. And we got the Republican vote, but we didn't really leave people there who are going to be carrying a gun now concealed with, I think, the protection that they need to make sure that they're not making the wrong choices and spending the rest of their life in prison. I'm sure you've seen a lot of this stuff also. Yeah. Yeah, Rob, thanks so much. I really appreciate you giving your perspective here. Listen, everybody, we have barely touched the tip of the iceberg here with everything that you do need to know. And again, it's not just about dealing with the legal side. It really is about understanding these things so you can make better shoot, don't shoot decisions, so that you know what to expect, so that you're in a better frame of mind when you do call 911, when police do show up, even when that threat presents itself and you might have to defend your own actions or defend your life or that of your family. So listen, CCW Safe actually has a course that's available to people that sign up. I mean, anybody that is a member of CCW Safe, and I highly encourage you to go check out their services there, because it's not like a typical insurance program out there. You're not dealing with like an insurance company. You're dealing with somebody who really is an advocate for you. And as Rob said, first call 911, get help there. Second call, CCW Safe. If you want to find out more about them, and I highly recommend you check out more of the information that they have about the aftermath. We're going to go ahead and put a link here with the podcast as well, but you can head on over. We'll make an extra a link that'll take you directly there, so you don't navigate around. But you can go over to warriorlife.com/aftermath, all one word, and we'll go ahead and make sure that that's going to lead over to where you can get more information on this as well. So, Rob, I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And listen, everybody, until our next broadcast, this is Jeff Anderson saying prepare, train, and survive.
Thank you so much, Jeff.